This is an Irish independent podcast.
Well, as you know, at this stage, Ireland's Autumn Nation Series kicks off in fine style on Friday night. New Zealand are in Dublin. We should say right at the top, and we're happy to say coverage of the Autumn Series here in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. They sponsor Irish rugby at all sorts of levels. At grassroots, there is, of course, the Energia AIL. They are the official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. And you'll hopefully be aware as well of the Energia Rugby for All initiative. Very much supports inclusion and a welcome to everybody of all abilities to participate in the game. If you want to learn more about Energia Rugby partnerships and their exclusive home energy offers to rugby fans, then you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Ruaidhri O'Connor of the Irish Independent after his week off last. Who do you think you are? A week off.
Player management, Joe.
Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah. How do you know when someone's run a marathon? Is that what you said? Did you say you ran a marathon?
No, I said player management.
Oh, player management.
No.
Sorry, we'll cut that out.
I was obviously hoping you'd bring it up, you know.
Sorry, I thought you said I ran a marathon. Which,
No.
I'll do that again. I'll do that again. I was like, Jesus, all right.
I'm a knob, but I'm not that much of a knob.
To hell with it. We'll leave it in.
What would you like me to tell you about it?
No, well done running a marathon.
Thank you very much.
Good man. And Andrew Trimble is in studio. 70 caps for Ireland between 2005 and 2017. And I was just on to you. I said, do you want to talk to us next week? You said, I'm in Dublin. So here you are.
In person, yeah. 70 caps for Ireland, 0 marathons, unfortunately. So
It's always time, Andrew.
yeah, it's tough.
Will you change that at any stage, do you think?
No, I've no interest. I hate running. It hurts to run nowadays.
Okay. I presume as a player it didn't hurt. There were times it didn't hurt at all.
You're always carrying something, so you're never completely injury free. But yeah, generally, my back didn't scream at me as much as it screams at me now.
Oh, is it not great now?
Yeah, no, I'm being a bit dramatic here. I'm adding a bit of spice, a bit of drama in Test match week, aren't I? It's not that bad.
Geordie Murphy did it. He's beaten the All Blacks alongside you when he's run a marathon, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he's only a couple of months out of it, well, a year or two out of retirement, so it's pretty good. And a big hulking frame to be dragging around.
Yeah, it's a good engine on though.
True.
Andrew and I have got to know each other a little bit on Virgin. He's dangerous. I always think anytime I work with him, God, if we'd played together, we'd have been friends. You know, I feel like it's a meeting of minds.
Yeah, that's such a compliment.
Mini bromance. Don't feel the need to say it back to me. But there was a period in our relationship where I couldn't tell if he was playing me with everything that he said. Such was the dryness of the wit. We actually addressed it.
Yeah, on air.
Well, not quite on air.
Share this with everyone.
Numerous. I was like, "Are you taking the piss out of me? I can't tell."
I think I do that accidentally, but it provides me with something that I think a lot of people don't have, just to put it right in between. And I think the reason why it's so confusing is because I'm not quite sure what I'm doing.
Because I vividly remember one day on the panel, obviously during the game, chatting away a little bit, and I was chatting to Rod Carney, who was next to me, about just trying to go to the gym a bit, and I'm starting to do weights, and I got to do all that. And Andrew sort of looks at me deadpan and says, "And what kind of weights are you lifting, Joe?" And I was like, I can't even tell.
No, I knew what I was doing that time.
Okay. Wikipedia tells me you've played New Zealand 7 times.
Oh, wow, that's more than I would have guessed.
Would you think so?
Yeah.
You have 6 losses and 1 win.
Yeah.
The 1 win, obviously, in
Chicago. Please, let's talk about that. That's all. You know, that is more or less all I talk about. This week is really all about me. The anniversary of Chicago.
You're witnessing history. Ireland will beat the All Blacks in senior rugby for the first time ever. There's crossing. It's an Ireland penalty. They'll have to kick it out. The Irish arms are raised in the air. The brave 23 Irish players know they've won it. Sean Cronin, look at his face. Delight on the Irish players. Delight on the faces of the Irish crowd.
What can you tell us about Chicago that we might not know already?
Most of the stories are probably already done the rounds, but it was, and it's hard to know retrospectively whether we made it special, because we obviously then kind of knew the way it panned out and knew the significance of the Axel 8 tribute, all those moments, and then the history in Chicago, specifically with Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, So a lot of that wouldn't have been talked about, or it's kind of retrospectively applied to what was a very special week. And then stories probably grow legs a little bit as well. So I'm sort of balancing it a little bit. But it was such a fun week. There was a level of excitement around that week, and it was when we were starting to get to the stage where we competed for 79 minutes 3 years earlier. So we kind of proved that we were able to compete for long periods, but the huge question mark was whether we could get to that next stage. So it wasn't physically or strategically or athletically what we could do on the pitch, but it was what we could do with our mindset, whether we could get that across the line. And Joe had hammered us loads and about that long period of time whenever Ireland were defending, and then eventually we all know the way that finished. So we had definitely not a cockiness, but there was a belief that was kind of, looking back at it now, we had no real right to have a belief, but there did feel like there was a sense of who knows. And we kind of felt like, okay, if we're ever going to do this, this is the best chance we've ever had, because we're extremely well prepared. And that week was incredible as well. Everybody, it felt like a buzz. There was a buzz. I remember we were in a WhatsApp group and everybody was jet lagged. It was 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Jimmy, he's the text in the group and said, anybody want to go for a brew? And within 10 seconds, 15 people replied, said, yeah, see you downstairs. So we were all excited to be in Chicago, new scenery, new environment, and we all went for coffee and the crack was good. And there was some slip of the tongue said something at lunch one day early in the week and said, Jesus, it's a great holiday so far. And Mervyn Murphy bit his head off, whoever it was, because he was like, if Joe hears you call this a holiday, he'll go mental. So I think that kind of summarized, we were unbelievably well prepared, professional, diligent, detailed, all of that good stuff that comes with Joe Schmidt. But there was definitely there was a fun approach to the week. We were visiting Chicago Bulls. We were at the parade for the homecoming for the Cubs.
The weather was amazing.
Yeah. And there was a lot of Irish in town. There was an excitement, an intangible thing. Again, I'm pretty sure that was there at the time, and I'm not adding that to memory retrospectively, but it felt like it was a very special week.
Yeah. No, I think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And I think some people, because it was in Chicago and stuff, it's almost, I don't know if it's been dismissed. It hasn't been dismissed necessarily. I know Patrick McCarry's written a play about it, so it's not being dismissed. But I think some people look at the 2018 win as because it was in Dublin, and I guess the All Blacks had come back the following week, and we'd seen, or 2 weeks later, with the backlash. But I always look at that, even though they were missing Retallick and Whitelock, both of them, I think, in the second row, and Kino started, and they maybe took their eye off the ball slightly, but it's still, they came back so strong in that second half. Ireland, it looked like it was happening again, and to wrest control of the game in the way that you did, and to score 5 tries against them when they never conceded that number of tries before. They were still, I think they were a team that was starting to fall away from the 2015 heights, but they hadn't fallen far at that stage. It was really 17 when it started to happen. It was an incredible achievement, and someone has to be the first. It was incredible that you went and did it that day. And I think the fact that it was in Chicago makes it all the more special, because it was an amazing week. Even just
well, that's good, because I think some people might be of the opinion they were on a bit of a jolly.
Maybe.
That's a very harsh way to put it. That's your only win. I'm not trying to take away from it, but given how they performed subsequently in Dublin, there's a sense of, Chicago, and they were off doing their touristy stuff as well, and maybe they weren't as tuned in as they might have been. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, well, that focused the minds for them, and then we saw a couple of weeks later what that did to them.
Yeah.
We probably didn't, despite, actually 2016 only happened because 2013 happened, and probably for them as well. So there's definitely not a cockiness, but even the fact that I'm saying not a cockiness, but there was a slightly more laid back approach maybe from them, because if you've never lost in 100 years, no one in your country has ever lost that fixture.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an inevitability. Of course, we're going to find a way to get this done.
And maybe they think, God, they didn't beat us in 13 that time. I mean, they'll never beat us.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And for us, that was the big challenge. So if that was their mindset, I'm not saying it was, who knows? But something changed. And our mindset then at halftime, I remember Johnny and Rory in particular were pleading with us. We have to keep playing rugby. If we stop playing rugby, the only reason we're in this position is because we've played rugby. And then just that shift as well. We saw what happened in the last 3 or 4 minutes in 13, and then that second half we We didn't take Johnny and Rory's advice at the start of the second half, but there was something clicked and something changed, and we put the ball into Zebo's hands. He put it in behind. I think it was Murray come up with a big shot on someone. Yeah. We got the scrum.
Was it Naholo?
Naholo, yeah.
Nailed one of the big guys.
One of the big lads.
Yeah, back over his own line.
Yeah, brilliant moment. That was a rousing moment. I think that might have been Johnny turned to the crowd. There was that was us not just surviving an All Blacks kind of, rousing ending to a game. That was us in the ascendancy, in the driving seat, and not just holding on, but wrestling the game back and finishing strong, and then Henshaw getting over for the try. So it was amazing, and just the fact, so many drunk Irish supporters having the times of their lives. It was brilliant. We looked up into the crowd, saw O'Connell and
Doug Howlett was there.
Dougie Howlett, the two of them. Yeah,
it's a great picture.
It was brilliant. It was lovely, and we all saw them at the same time, and it was we'd loved, someone like Drico, him to be involved in that.
He was there.
He was there as well.
Yeah, I saw him the night before.
I didn't see him at the time, but we all saw Paulie and
Penny for their thoughts. O'Connell, O'Driscoll.
Exactly. But Paulie he just looked. We just saw this look, and everybody was on the same page. It looked like we were looking at our parents, and they were so proud of us. They were kind of sharing that moment a little bit. Yeah. And then there was one lad, I'll never forget. One lad dressed up as the Pope, and but completely poker faced. I mean, he was in character, really in character, and he kind of gave us a nod and was like, even the Pope is just so happy for us here. It was just, everybody was having the crack, and it was a brilliant buzz after the game.
Easy to forget Ireland left. Joe left Sean O'Brien and Peter O'Mahony behind. He said they hadn't done enough training, and that was a big talking point that week. So I mentioned a couple of the All Blacks that were missing, but he went with, didn't Josh start that game, or was it Geordie start? One of them did their cruciate. Yeah, and then he did his cruciate, chasing back a disallowed on penalty advantage. It was called back, and he'd done his cruciate, and Josh came on. I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So it was magic.
In some ways, the 2 weeks later. Was it a week later or 2 weeks later?
I think it was 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks.
Must have been two, yeah. So, can you remember the scoreline that day?
I looked it up recently, actually, but I can't remember. I can't remember.
21-9. So Ireland only scoring 9 points at home to New Zealand. The enduring memory a lot of people have is Robbie Henshaw going off in a neck brace. Sexton went off as well, injured. CJ Stander was off the pitch as well. There was a ferocity to the All Blacks backlash that was big. It wasn't like they said, okay, let's go out there and show our New Zealand the DNA and quick hands and skillful rugby, and that'll teach these boys.
It was back to basics, wasn't
Let's go out and smash them.
Yeah.
And they did. I don't know, were you anticipating the physicality? Do you remember?
No, I'm not sure. We once the final whistle went in Chicago, we went, lovely, brilliant, what a moment, historic, let's all celebrate and have a good time. Completely forgot about their perspective, where they are at. They're the first New Zealanders ever to get beat by Ireland. Hurting. That's a proud rugby nation. Devastated, hurting, getting abused. Imagine how many WhatsApp groups just lit up, slagging the lads for creating history in the negative sense. And that hurt. If it had been, to your point, a week later, who knows, it mightn't have been as much, but it festered for 2 weeks. We came back to Dublin, and there was a ferocity that I'd never seen before. And I think that kind of underlines, we talk about the All Blacks, I mean, they're like the Beatles, they're ahead of their time. They do stuff that no one else has done. All the rest of world rugby follow their lead. Yeah. They're the ones that understand this sport. So that's how we think of them. That's the New Zealand brand for us. But actually, the foundations of that is a competitiveness, a feistiness, a fieriness, just a pride in what they do. We do this best. We do this better than anyone. Yeah. And we saw all of that pride and ferocity. I mean, they scored within a few minutes. The second game in Dublin, and Israel Dag just turned and screamed at us. The other side of the pit, it was a crossfield kick, I think it was, screamed at us, and we honestly, there was a couple of us on the deck, and we sort of go, we have really upset these lads. It was real. It was serious. I think Fikatola took Zebo's head off.
Yeah,
that
should have been
day
2
as
red
well.
cards.
Yeah. And there was something about, there was an intangible, well, it is tangible, I suppose, the amount of kind of injuries and big hits there were, but that's the basis of everything. We saw that in all its fullest form.
And based on your understanding of dressing rooms, that kind of physical response doesn't just happen by coincidence. It's not like as individuals, geez, I'm really up for it today, but this guy seems to be physically up for it too, and so does he over. They would have had to talk about it that week, I would presume, or that fortnight, and prioritise it?
I'd say so. I mean, we all remember like big Irish performances, and it's a physicality, but it's also a work rate and an energy, and there's something a little bit intangible. I all remember Irish games, often against England back in the day, whenever our talent was okay, we had a little bit of an ability, but really what got us across the line was that passion and pride and all of the old school rugby, traditional kind of approaches to the game. But there's something about one or two, maybe All Blacks leading that, and then that kind of trickling through the rest of the team. Andy Farrell would have talked quite a lot about, he used the phrase bounce in defence. So the bounce is the impact that you, through your body language, has on all the other defenders left and right of you. And that was, that could have been the case, or it could have been a preparation. We need to go somewhere that we've never gone before, whatever that is.
Because I sort of am anticipating a similar mood on Friday, I have to say, Rory.
From the All Blacks or from Ireland?
Both. From New Zealand, because this 5-9 thing is still there. This rivalry now is not a good one for them at the moment. I even think 2022 and the series win on Kiwi soil, and you're just a shit Richie McCaw, and even the Sexton book, I think from their perspective, he has broken ranks in bringing this up and going public with it. So I think that's all there, and it's like, we need to put these guys really back in their box, and let's do it in Dublin. And I think from the Irish perspective, revenge, they won't use that word. We'll talk about it where revenge features in a sports person's mindset with you, Andrew, but revenge for the World Cup quarter-final, plus I still think you have to remember that South African tour. The mood of that build-up to the second test was Andy Farrell telling his team in no uncertain quarters or terms, you let them physically bully you in that first test. You let Snyman take Craig Casey's head off. No one said boo. We saw the reaction in the second test. It was back to first principles. And so I think that's so fresh in the mind. I don't think first principles will be forgotten in the build-up to tomorrow night. So I think both of them are going to be talking about the physical stakes for this game more than they might for lots of games. You can only focus on one or two things, three things in a week, really.
Yeah.
I think for both of them, that's coming.
I think it's a good example, because I was going to bring it up that between Test 1 and Test 2 was quite similar to Chicago into Dublin for the All Blacks, and Farrell pushed a lot of buttons. I think the players were quite shocked by his reaction to that first Test defeat, that after everything they'd done, strips were being torn off, the captain was dropped, Bundy Aki was dropped, two, World Player of the Year nominee and your captain gone. Aki wasn't even in the 23. And you saw that I think that was as physical an Irish performance as I've ever seen in that first half.
Didn't they say, they all denied the Snyman moment was in the video clips, but they did say Farrell took them through a package of their body language and just their general aggression levels. Yeah. I mean, how kind of provocative is that? Andy Farrell is standing up going, look at that.
Yeah.
So I just think that's still in the ether for the team.
And I do think Farrell has railed a little bit against perception that his environment is a happy one and it's happy clappy and everyone's enjoying themselves all the time. I think that started to bug him a little bit, and he maybe felt after that first week in Johannesburg that everyone was a little bit too comfortable, and he just lit a fire under them. Sorry, it was a deserved fire, because they were second best in that first test, and they've been so good for so long. His greatest challenge is to keep lighting fires and keep them going. So if they bring that level, the motivation is there for both teams. You're right. I think if you were looking at it mentality wise, the World Cup quarter final, considering the 17 of the 23 played in it, or were part of the 23 that day, Jack Crady didn't get on. Surely that's the higher motivation, that they want to go and they think they're a better team than New Zealand. They're convinced of it. Johnny said it in his book. They think that they were the better team and they just were beaten on the night. And even Farrell said yesterday, we could have won that game. We got to remember we were very close to winning that game. So their sense of injustice is that they were beaten by a worse team who gave an era-defining performance on that day.
Yeah, no, listen, we don't have to rank who's more motivated, but I'll give you a final word, Andrew, and I'll take everything Rory said, but I'll throw on another layer for New Zealand, having listened to their press coverage all year. They've been beaten 4 times in a row by South Africa. They've beaten what they don't consider a great English side, but only just about. There's still a degree of Ireland and France is going to define our season. Is it going to be a good one or a bad one? So these players know if they lose to Ireland, and Scott Robertson knows it's coming on thick and heavy back home. So I just think it's going to be ferocious. I think there's such motivation on both sides.
I think it's going to be ferocious. I think they need to marry that, though. I don't think that will be enough to beat this Ireland side. They have to outsmart this Ireland side as well, and that is a huge ask. I think So they can probably get themselves into a headspace to bring that level of aggression and confrontation, line speed, physicality, all that good stuff. But they have to marry that. There has to be a subtlety and there has to be a sophistication to their phase play. We saw moments of it last week against England. I thought, whatever New Zealand think about England, but I thought there was a lot to that English defensive performance. I thought it was very formidable. I thought it was nearly the complete performance. I know there's tackle stats being thrown around. Tackle stats for me are pretty misleading. I thought they had a lot to deal with, and against a pretty formidable English defence, scoring 3 tries and playing some okay rugby at times, the energy kept in that England defence. So they've still got that, and they'll need both, I think, to come to Dublin with and get a bit of joy.
Something I want to ask you about was, I guess Johnny Sexton's book is very fresh in everyone's minds. Rory, I know you read it. It was very telling. So you first played for Ireland in 2005, Andrew. And Sexton obviously made his debut in 2009 for Ireland. And then I guess it's around 2009, 10, 11, 12. He's talking about coming up against New Zealand. I know, this is a very successful Johnny Sexton at this stage, winning European Cups with Leinster and doing just fine for Ireland. But he talked about the dynamism and the kind of fitness, actually, of Dan Carter and New Zealand. And he talked about puking in the dressing room after one of the games and just thinking it was different level to everyone else around him. And it reminded me of around like 2000, 2001, when Keith Wood was still playing for Ireland and O'Connell was coming on the scene. They were looking at the English team and saying, we're not as fit as them. Like, how do we get to their level? They were behind them physically. And they obviously got up to those levels across the 2000s. But for Sexton, the 2010s, there was a degree of like physically, we need to catch these guys. If you were there from 2005, I presume you would have felt that with New Zealand, that physically Ireland were just not on their level.
Yeah, it felt like it. Now, there was a number of times we toured New Zealand. 2006 was my first tour. And I remember my kind of takeaway from that tour was just the breakdown was just, it was just like someone just exploded and all these bodies just landed. Like the intensity and the pace and the speed of that breakdown just emerging. And maybe that's as a youngster at the time, kind of feeling like, oh my goodness, this is like another world, or not. This is like, is this rugby we're looking at? It just, I know that's New Zealand. Like this is, McCaw and these types of guys, But the physicality and the pace and the speed was incredible. We were like rabbits in the headlights, long periods. And that went on for a good few years, in my experience, to the point where we got, put 60 points on us in, what year was
12,
that? 12.
Yeah.
And just, we were just nowhere near it. To turn it around from 12 into 13 and then building that into 16 is a huge turnaround in Irish rugby. Something
else from that period, I wanted to get your take on this general refrain that they only knew Brian O'Driscoll's name. I sort of wonder if that is true. I'm inclined to think that they knew everybody's names, give or take, and that maybe just in the media, it's hard to pull names, or maybe psychologically they don't want to give Andrew Trimble props publicly. Why would I boost his confidence? But I just can't marry high performance environment, we leave no stone unturned, which is their MO supposedly, with who plays on the wing for them? I refuse to believe they didn't know your name and everybody else's names.
No, I think they wouldn't have known my name. In that first tour in 2006, I'd only played not even a full season of professional rugby. I was playing Ireland under-21s the year before, and Dougie Howlett was in the wing. Mills Miliana, maybe 15. Don't know who the other winger would have been.
You don't think Dougie Howlett would have...
Sivivadu,
you don't think he would have cared to check your name?
He is such a conscientious... No, he's different. I don't think Mills Miliana or Sivivadu would have known. Now, the difference between... I remember this being explained to me kind of in kind of the build-up to that game. I forget who it was, took me aside and said, Dougie Howlett is more of a kind of purist. He will be diligent, detailed. He will be conscientious. He'll be very, very well prepared. He's a guy who's, yes, he's got a skill set. He's pacey. He's got all that good stuff. But he's also a really good rugby player, and he's really professional. The other guys, there's just X factor. Mullane maybe a little bit kind of a hybrid in between. Like Sivivatu was just X factor. Put the ball in his hands. He's got X factor. He'll get offloads, beat defenders. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have known who I was.
I just find that strange. Maybe if they're playing...
Not specifically him. I'm highlighting
but generally,
him. But a lot of their backline wouldn't have known who I was.
Maybe if they're playing Namibia, but I just would have thought somewhere along a long week...
We were Namibia to them.
Wow.
So what? I don't know what they beat us that. And actually those tests probably weren't like the Hamilton 60-0.
Yeah.
But I mean, the teams that we would have beat 60-0 back in the mid-noughties, there's every chance we wouldn't have known their names.
But you can do video analysis without learning the names of the people you're analysing. They probably would have known Ireland had a big winger. You know, yourself and Tommy, they probably were interchangeable at times, but they would have known the profile of the players they were coming up against. But if Sean O'Brien replaced Brian as the one player, because Kino always respected Shawnee, and they were miffed that Shawnee wasn't the only player they talked about in the build up to 2016 was why have you not brought Shawnee with you? Because he was the one who had their attention. So I do believe that certainly from a player's point of view, their name recognition wouldn't have been high, but they would have known what Ireland's attack shape looked like. They would have known what Ireland's lineup. Okay. They would have done the work, but they just wouldn't have necessarily spent their afternoons watching Champions Cup or Six Nations and kind of had the name. You know, they're in their own little bubble down there, I think, at times. And certainly now, I mean, I was in Pretoria and a South African dad had his son with him as the Irish team walked into Loftus, and he was like, there's Cian Healy, there's Bundy Aki. He knew every player, and the kid was like, oh. And they obviously see URC, they're way more akin to it, but the Irish players are now, you know, they're seen as the superstars alongside, you know, with the same kind of global profile as the All Blacks, as South Africa, as anyone. And I think that's one of the big changes that's happened in the year since probably 16.
So then, you know, when Ioane says to Sexton, enjoy retirement, you see, and Sexton...
You're going to argue that's ultimately a mark of respect?
No. I thought Sexton's response might be quite telling, because in his book he says back to him, you're just a fake, humble mother ducker. And so do you think, I don't want to get you in trouble, do you think there's a perception within the Irish fraternity at large, within other teams, that this whole New Zealand, we sweep the dressing room stuff, this humility piece is BS?
Well, it's been tested in the last number of years, because it's okay to be humble whenever you're the best team in the world, effortlessly the best team in the world, year after year. Granted, one or two disappointing World Cups, but generally everybody was like, okay, that's a mistake. They're still the best team in the world. They set the standard. So I think it's easy to be humble. I'm using inverted commas. I think it's much more challenging whenever you have to dig deep. You have to get to that place where you build up that rivalry in your head. You've got that competitiveness and you've got that feistiness. You know, there's some of that maybe wouldn't be typically described as humble. And so Johnny touched on something I think that is there. It is real. I think if anybody talks about humility as much as New Zealanders talk about humility, there's a suggestion that that's not that humble.
We're the most humble team in the world.
Yeah. Here's our book on humility. Literally. Here's a book we wrote on humility.
I don't think they love that book, actually.
No.
I was at a talk Dan Carter gave, and I don't think they were best pleased about that book.
Yeah.
But it definitely plays into their brand.
It does,
and even during the World Cup, they put out videos of the team helping unload the truck and like, look at us. We're wonderful. At the same time, Mark Talea was stood down for the World Cup quarter-final for disciplinary purposes. Ethan de Groot missed Twickenham last week because something that happened disciplinary and is not in 23. So the old, good people make good All Blacks, no dickheads kind of policy is being breached on a more regular basis now than it ever was when in that 11 to 15 team.
You could argue in their defence, I don't know what Talea did, by the way, I straight up don't know. But you could argue, actually, God, to drop him for disciplinary reasons for a World Cup quarter-final shows a certain adherence to their DNA of, hang on, if you misbehave, we're not just going to say it's okay. So that was kind of admirable. Like, I don't think
but it just shows players were less likely to stay in line, even though what was at stake. I think he went out. I think that was reported that he went out and broke curfew. What de Groot has done hasn't been reported just yet. But it was some breach of team protocol.
To be fair to them, I think some teams, if superstar Trimble broke curfew, I think they'd say, World Cup quarter-final, Andrew, don't do it again. But you're obviously starting.
Yeah, well, there's some players that there'd be more of a hard line. Undroppable players like myself, I would say, in that category. The humble piece, I think, it just got a little bit old. I think people started kind of rolling their eyes a little bit, and people are cynical at the best of times and kind of maybe a little bit fed up hearing that.
Yeah.
And so that's why, Johnny's response is perfect. It would have been better if he had said it straight away rather than going away and then realising and think of a good comeback and then going out chasing him across the pitch.
He was a bit shook. He just called me a C. I've just retired.
There was a lot going on in fairness.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine what's going on in his head. I remember I was in the stand at that stage, and I was just player camming Johnny just because I suppose I care about what he's thinking and what's going on and the turmoil that's in his head. Yeah. So I remember I had, before even all of this came out, the details around what was said. I remember saying he has said something. He has been a dickhead there. He has said something real. But I think where we are now, so getting past that no dickheads humility piece, it's okay to be a dickhead if it's your dickhead. Like Peter O'Mahony, for example, him saying to Sam Cane, we all thought that's hilarious. Not one of us Irish listeners or supporters thought he was being a dickhead there. But he will 100% be perceived that way in New Zealand. Yeah. So, and this is what this is the Farrell era. That's why it resonated so much with the team and elsewhere. Be yourselves, and Rico O'Mahony, obviously he's feisty, obviously he's competitive, and obviously wanted to land a blow on Johnny on a personal level. I don't really like that. Johnny hated it. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't like that, but he's just being honest, I suppose, and wearing his heart on his sleeve.
All is fair in love and war. Were they more or less about as mouthy as any other team?
Oh, and the All Blacks. I don't think they would have been particularly mouthy with. Again, I was only part of one game where we beat them.
It's true.
We didn't deserve to get mouthed at.
I'm not going to lower myself to. I don't even know your name.
Genuinely, I know you're kind of slagging. It is actually respectful to Johnny to be that abusive to him.
Yes.
But Johnny didn't. The equivalent of Johnny 20 years earlier didn't exist because they didn't. There was no rivalry. We didn't exist until 2016. We landed, and all of a sudden there was a rivalry, and they knew all their names very quickly.
Yes. Okay. Let's get into the game. So for what it's worth, Ireland are top of the world rankings. They are looking for win number at the Aviva.
20.
Correct. 20 in a row at the Aviva.
24 and 25.
The one being...
France.
Sorry. The red card.
No. Johnny was injured. He'd been... he failed the HIA in the week, and I think Ross Byrne started. Or Billy Byrne started and Ross Byrne came off the bench. Empty Aviva Stadium.
I can't remember it.
It was really grim. I think it was 15-14. It was...
What year was that? 21?
21, yeah. Right in the height of the pandemic. And then...
Do you remember that?
No.
France won the Grand Slam that year. They celebrated wildly in the dressing room. It was a massive moment in their development. Yeah. And it looked like... That was the result that put Andy Farrell under enormous pressure.
For the England games.
And then they went to Italy the following week, or 2 weeks later, and won.
Yeah, okay. God, I have no memory of it.
Yeah. No.
We've blanked out the fact that Farrell didn't have much joy at the start.
Yeah.
We seem to have forgotten that in general, that whole period. But it did take them a while to kind of find their feet.
Andy Farrell was asked if revenge will be a theme for the week.
Always answering no to that question.
He said, no, it's not. That's the truth.
Yes, you got me.
So look, I don't think lads would use the word revenge. It's a little bit too grand. But I presume across the week there is a degree of we owe them for last year talk.
Yeah, I'd say so internally. And even if it's not kind of formally mentioned or presented on, everybody will be thinking that, okay?
I'd imagine in the 5 minutes of right, on your feet, let's go, dressing room on Friday night, someone's going to say, we owe these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so.
Absolutely.
Is it useful? Is it helpful? Is a little bit of revenge, frisson in the air a good thing?
Yeah, we've talked about it a number of times, or even in this conversation, about how a backlash, there's something intangible about that body language, energy, whatever that is, it definitely brings something else.
How good are New Zealand, Rory?
They're dangerous. They're massively dangerous. I don't think they're anywhere near a complete side, and I don't think they're anywhere near the team that Andrew was part of a team that Ireland beat in 2016. Like the level they were at then, I think they've been in decline ever since the 2015 World Cup. I think 16 was the start of it. The 17 Lions tour was when I really realised that these guys are vulnerable. I remember Steve Hansen came into the media before the third test and talked about maybe we should start taking results a little less seriously. We need to just focus on the human side of things. And you're listening to the All Blacks coach preparing the media for a potential test series defeat. The following year, Ireland beat them in Dublin. And just year on year, they've come back to the pack. They haven't won the last 2 World Cups. They could have last year. Like they roused themselves for a really excellent run through the knockouts, but for that red card, they could have beaten South Africa that day, and they were immense against Ireland. But that was the performance of an era. They're not as consistent as they used to be. They're not as consistent as Ireland. And Scott Robertson's come in, and there was only 10 of the 23 that played against Ireland at the World Cup still in the squad. I know some will come back. So they've had a huge amount of change, way more change than Ireland have. They've had a fairly, by their standards, average year, even though they ran, they've been in a lot of tight games. They've won some of them against England. They've lost some of them against South Africa. But they're definitely not the force that they once were. But they have a back three that is still probably the most dangerous, apart from maybe South Africa in World Rugby. They have a 10 who, if he gets good ball, can cut you open. They've got Geordie Barrett. They have a scrum that's improving and possibly has the edge on Ireland this weekend. And they have the breakout star in World Rugby in Wallace Atiti. So you can say that they're not the All Blacks of old, but it would be stupid to say they've become a bad team. They've just, relative to the greatest team of all time, they're not as strong as they once were. And on balance, I think Ireland are a better team, even if New Zealand have some individuals who we just don't produce players of that kind of danger. And that X factor is a terrible phrase, but it's the one that keeps coming into my head.
Yeah.
All of that being said, it does feel like there's a bit of kind of excitement and expectation in New Zealand around Scott Robertson and where he's going to take this team.
Yeah.
He's not going to take this team where they want to go, in the last 6 days since Twickenham. But there's definitely moments whenever you go, and you touched on it, they're dangerous. There is X factor, using inverted commas. There is an ability to really hurt you and do damage on moments and glimpses of opportunities. And against England, there were long periods where they were under pressure, but they still found a way to get an offload, to find a little bit of a gap, an opportunity. And then Talea just showed just how dangerous they are. So there's that. It's slightly more put the ball into the hands of someone. I think there's slightly less thought from like a structural approach, and more of a, put the ball into someone dangerous, put it into his hands, and he'll do something. And we'll be able to get a foothold in this game that way.
That sounds a lot less sophisticated.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is less. I think they're less sophisticated. I think they're going back to basics a little bit. And that basics is kind of illustrated by Beauden Barrett kicking the ball, I don't know how many times last weekend at Twickenham, but that's a pragmatism that they have to go back to that, because you're playing against that English defence. We'll not see anywhere near that much kicking, I wouldn't have thought, this weekend, because Ireland's defence wouldn't be as confrontational or as aggressive. There wouldn't be as much line space. There's no need.
Yeah.
But New Zealand have probably had to go back to basics and be a little bit more pragmatic.
Yeah, it's efficient as well. I think Ian Madigan made the point on the show the other day. They can score off first phase, or two passes and Will Jordan suddenly in space, whereas Ireland, an awful lot has to go right and an awful lot of effort has to go in to construct these multi-phase tries that Ireland can score from. So while it's sometimes simple is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Are you worried about the Irish scrum?
Yeah. I think anytime Ireland go in without Tadhg Furlong, you have to be a little bit worried. Yes, Finlay Bealham has credit in the bank, but the scrum was poor in South Africa, both tests, and John Fogarty's come out in the media and said that it was nowhere near where they wanted it to be. Sheehan's not there. Kelleher's played 12 minutes this season. His replacement, Rob Herring, hasn't played at all. Tom O'Toole still, while has beaten the All Blacks, I think he came off the bench in 2022 and is a very good around the park player. They've never really trusted him to play a big test at tight end unless they needed to. So he's been in the camp for 2 or 3 years now at this stage, and they still only play him when they need to. So there's a lot on Bealham's shoulders. They've picked a really big back five to support them. I think they'll get a lot of power through their second rows. But New Zealand's scrum is really improving, and they have a bench, the front row replacement bench, that will make more of an impact than Ireland's. Cian Healy's coming towards the end of his career. O'Toole is, should be in his prime, but is very inexperienced and is not a renowned scrummager. You see a lot more of him than I do, Andrew, up close and personal. And then Herring, I think, is an excellent set-piece player, both scrum and line-out, but just hasn't played all year, so it's hard to, you're kind of putting a bit of faith in him being able to pitch up. So I think it's one of the major areas of concern that New Zealand will go after him. Ireland had the first choice front row on the pitch in Paris, and Wayne Barnes whistled them off the park, and they still think they were in the right that day, but that doesn't matter because the ref didn't.
So I dare say, Andrew Porter is used to being asked to do 70 plus minutes. Tadhg Furlong's used to being asked to do 70 plus minutes. I suspect Finlay Bealham will be asked to do 70 plus minutes.
I'd say he'll do 6. I think they'll trust O'Toole. It's just whether, I hope O'Toole comes out and delivers a performance that means they can trust him forever. But until we see it, it's hard. You got to have a little bit of a doubt around it.
It's not a glaring opportunity for New Zealand, but it is. There's a slight question mark all across that front row. Like, Porter's the established, first choice, but as you said, he's not got the rub of the green with referees of late. And then minutes in the legs of both hookers. And Finlay Bealham has had opportunities in the past, and he's vindicated his selection, but that's not Tadhg Furlong. to your point. So there's three kind of question marks over the whole front row, and all it needs is one or two of those to fail.
Quite a few areas you would happily do player cam on Friday. This matchup at the back rows, I think, if we could have 6 player cams, I'd watch it. So we have Byrne, Van der Fleer, Doris against Wallace Atiti, who Rory has mentioned, and we talked about on Tuesday. It's a bit of a phenomenon overnight. Sam Kane, Ardy Savea. So who are you taking?
Wallace Atiti is incredible. Just what he did at Twickenham, just bursting onto the scene and just being a youngster. Just wonder how that level of performance will continue as he kind of matures a little bit. And, knocking edges off and inevitable maybe second season syndrome or whatever his career looks like. Yeah. But he just looks, he looks the full pie. He looks like someone to get excited about. Compare him to Tadhg Beirne, and they're very, very different. But whenever you look at what Tadhg Beirne's done at Test match level, on tour in New Zealand specifically, and how good he was, that was a big moment for him. That was a coming of age, right? This guy is incredible and able to mix it in the second row and the back row. Doris has been really good this season so far. Yeah. And talking about Ciaran Doris, we bore ourselves because we talk about how consistently good he was. Probably dropped off a little bit towards the end of last season as a reflection of Leinster dropping off a little bit in general. But he's back this year in a big way. Got a stamp of approval from Andy Farrell as well, team captain. He's going to lead this team for a number of years now. And he leads it in what he does, his skill set, his physicality, everything. And he's obviously going to develop more and more as a leader. So I think Ireland are in the driving seat in a number of different departments, as in they're the world number one. They're the ones that kind of set their stall out, and this is New Zealand to disrupt that. But this is certainly a New Zealand back row that is capable of disrupting it.
Obviously, I think a consistent, unless I'm wrong, you'd know Rory for sure, but from memory, a consistent in all these 5 Irish wins to some degree or other has been Johnny Sexton.
Yeah.
So you are stood out in the wing. You know the importance of the milliseconds that Sexton with his class can buy you with the ball, that extra yard of space that he can manipulate. This is a big test for Jack Crowley, a whole host of areas. 1, getting the attack going, and 2, I guess you got to be careful how you kick against this brilliant counter-attacking team. So this is a big one.
I think so, yeah. And the kicking game in particular, that's the biggest challenge with Jack Crowley. There's been a lot of questions asked of him this year. But for me, there were no questions asked up until the tour in South Africa, and that was because Frawley got the drop goal. So that immediately introduces another kind of conversation with him, and then Munster this year, Jack Crowley's just suffering because he's playing in front of a beaten pack and a turbulent environment or a difficult environment, whatever's going on down there.
He's forced at times, like it was in South Africa, it might have been Sharks, but like first 40 seconds throws a pass that isn't on, intercept pass,
Stormers,
was
the first one.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a reflection of him.
I think
that's
not
a reflection of all of this other stuff. Because actually
it was Tadhg Beirne that threw a bad pass to him, and then he threw a bad pass to someone else. So
like they're all on the back foot.
I'd be amazed if they're doing that in the green jersey.
Absolutely. Can you imagine the breath of relief he breathes going to Portugal, back in the environment, back with Farrell, back with his teammates that he knows. Last time they were together, they were winning games in South Africa. That there'll be an excitement from him, and I think we'll see that excitement and relief and that comfort from him being in that environment, contributing to leading that environment as well, and just getting away from Munster will be very, very good for him.
Your point there. So you'd have an experience of this, I suppose, on the wing. Who was your big rival? Who were you fighting it out for a jersey? Can you remember?
Tommy, Bo, often. Usually one of us was injured, so we didn't actually compete that much.
I'm just wondering with Crowley. So he arrived and post Sexton very much anointed and did very well, in fairness to him. And now suddenly, because of Frawley's form, there's a conversation happening. He won't be immune to that. His friends will tell him about it. His family. He may read the papers because he's a normal human being. Sexton has talked about how it's not easy being a number 10 when there's a big rival for your jersey. It's a decision-making position. You need security of tenure. You can't be thinking, oh my God, I tried this, it didn't come off. Is Frawley warming up? So this is now Crowley makes a mistake. Now he seems mentally strong, but makes a mistake. One, he has to deal with the pressure of, God, I'm wearing the 10 jersey, I made a mistake, which he's been very good at thus far. But now added to that, is Frawley warming up? So there's a bit going on for him. It's not easy.
Someone like Johnny will present, he'll tell the story that way because that's probably the environment he would have preferred to have been in. But no doubt, the competitiveness with Raj made Johnny better. I would say, no doubt. Okay. I mean, he talked about, seeing his face behind the sticks.
He's not, maybe it made him better in the long term, but he talks about 9, 10, the 11 World Cup. O'Driscoll sort of saying to him, come on, like, can we see Leinster, Johnny? He's like, I don't even know if I can start in. Mm-hmm. How am I meant to run the week? So he thinks 9, 10, 11, obviously Raj fell away at 12. He wasn't as good for Ireland as he was for Leinster because of Raj.
Maybe even long term then. So Johnny talked, when we saw like a real evolution of Johnny as a leader, as a player, everything. And maybe we never would have seen that really mature.
He conceded that. So maybe in the long term made him better, made him more possessed, more obsessive. But in that 2-3 year period when Raj's face is on the screen, he doesn't feel it. He was better for Leinster than Ireland, he feels, and it was because of the intensity of that. It's a real catch-22,
Well, it's not that different though. What we're talking about with Jack Crowley experiencing that tension and that competitiveness now, and competing for that place. It's not that dissimilar from the expectation that he would have had, taking on the mantle, the 10 jersey from Johnny when Johnny retired.
That was pressure enough anyway.
That was pressure enough, yeah.
Fair point.
And it's just the expectation from people, or can you achieve, under these circumstances, can you deliver?
I guess he's clear enough for Frawley, would you think?
I asked Andy Farrell about it yesterday, and he said, look, he's got some credit in the bank, but there is competition. I think if Friday night goes bad, or tomorrow night goes badly, he's not that far ahead. That Frawley has come into the season looking the part. He looks like he's got a bit of a hot hand. I know he picked up a little bit of an injury, but whether it was taking command of a Champions Cup final, I know it didn't finish the way he wanted it, but he was so good that day. South Africa coming in, it was the first time Crowley was taken off in any of the test matches last season, was in that second test, and Frawley comes on and Crowley has to watch from the sideline as someone else is the hero in his position. I think Frawley would have gone to Portugal knowing he wasn't going to start this weekend, but knowing that if he trains hard enough, he will get an opportunity in one of these games. I don't know if he has to wait for Fiji. I suspect Farrell would share, because he loves cohesion and continuity, Farrell would share that Sexton idea of a 10. He is Owen Farrell's dad after all. He knows, he built a world-class 10, certainly played a huge role in it. Yeah. I think he knows that a 10 can't be doubting himself that much. But at the same time, if Jack Crowley does turn up and play the way he's been playing against for Munster, which I don't think he will, but if he does, if he's not converting tries, if he's missing kickable penalties, if he's botching restarts, if he looks like his confidence has deserted him, well then Frawley is there putting his hand up going, I'm ready, put me in. And I don't think the distance is that far between them right now. And the other thing Crowley has to deal with is, and Frawley has to deal with this too, is that Prendergast is the long-term project, and they're putting a lot of time and investment into him, and we'll see him, I believe, in the next month as well. But no, Johnny's a great example. No career is linear. Jack Crowley may go on and win 100 caps for Ireland, but there will be a spell where he finds himself out of the team, and it's how he responds to that, and it's a big test of his character. I guess it's not a bad time in a World Cup cycle to have this, that he has to come through it, and by 2027 he'll be better for the experience. But he's looking at the Lions next summer, as he wants to be the starting 10 for the Lions, so he needs to stay in the Irish team. He wants to just nail this role, and I think Friday's a big game in his career, and at this stage of his career, I think it's a big game for him.
Yeah,
the fact that Farrell used those words, he's got a lot of credit. He's effectively admitting he's not playing as well as we have seen him in the past, and we understand if it's based on form, it's credit is the reason why he's been selected.
Not a form selection.
Exactly, yeah. And he absolutely does have credit, and he deserves, because there's context here, and the context is Munster, the environment is not a healthy one for one reason or another, and his performance are a reflection of that.
Yeah, I think Ty Burns in the same boat as well. He did say there was a couple of players in that boat that he felt, because McCarthy's barely played as well, even though I don't think there's any doubt over his ability. So there's a few of them who are coming in with no form, so that's a little bit of a risk for Ireland.
Yeah. Final word. Who wins and why? Any other business we haven't mentioned? Rory?
I think I've come into the week very confident that Ireland will win, and that's been chipped away at all week. And I still am holding on to it.
Why is that?
I think the tag for long, we can't underestimate, we can talk about tactics and all that sort of stuff, but you do want to have your best players on the pitch, and he is still arguably the best tight head in the world, and he's certainly in that conversation. And you take him out of the team, it's a major risk against one of the top 4 or 5. Like Farrell said it yesterday, there's only a score between them every time they play. We saw it at the World Cup, we saw it in Twickenham last week, we saw it during the Six Nations, we saw it in South Africa. These are tight games decided by refereeing decisions, by selections, by all these things. And Furlong, to me, moves the dial a little bit. But I think Ireland, you got to just fall back on their record. The fact that they just beat South Africa in their last game. I think we kind of, the longer it is away from them, you kind of forget how good they are. And then they come out on Friday night and they'll remind you, geez, this is a good team. And they know each other so well. They know the game plan. They're more established team than New Zealand. They've got a great coach. They've got a good 15. Like that 15 came out yesterday. Even just watching people from other countries react on social media, it was almost like when the Box named their team and everyone kind of loses their mind because it's such a good team on paper. It's a decent bench, very experienced bench. I thought he might have gone with Baird and maybe Casey to keep tempo up, but he's gone with Henderson, O'Mahony coming on, leaders, club captains, coming in, influencing the game home. I think there's enough there to beat New Zealand. But it wouldn't surprise me if the All Blacks pulled something out of their bag and sucker punched them. Even when they won in 2022, Ireland, they were behind at half time because they dominated for 40 minutes and New Zealand scored from nothing, an overthrow line out. And I think it was Cody Taylor draws the defender, gives it to Will Jordan, who's scored every time he's played against Ireland. Like they have these people, it just takes them less effort to score. So I'm less convinced than I was at the start of the week, but I think they will win.
I do really like that about Farrell, by the way. He's such a great selector. Like I love that Bundy Aki turning 35 next birthday, you're still in. Peter O'Mahony, you're still in. Conor Murray, you're still in. I think he talked yesterday in the press conference about, I'm not throwing people in if they're not ready. But equally, he's not afraid to say Jamie Osborne, in you go, full back. No one saw that coming. Yeah. He's just, like, I mean, I'll get your final prediction in a second, Andrew, but I presume to be a player, like he's none of this business of, I'm picking a team to win in 6 months' time. It's like, let's just take care of today and we'll worry about tomorrow.
Yeah, he's got a really good balance, doesn't he? Because he there's definitely players that he trusts and they get selected. If it's ever a 50-50, he goes for them. Henderson, Murray, these types of guys, experienced heads, Pete, and all coming off the bench. There's no doubt that that's not a coincidence. He wants experience coming off the bench, so he maybe expects this game to be a little bit tighter in the balance. But that's when you get your experienced heads in the game making decisions.
And that's a good thing. When you've been out there, you want that.
I think so. Okay. I think that's a good thing. Now, England did that last weekend and it backfired. Keep the youngster. He's not young anymore, Smith. But, like that, he was the perfect, George Ford was the perfect man to get that game across the line. And it wasn't in the end, ultimately. Yeah. But I think kind of reflecting what you're saying as well, I'm nervous about it. But it's just because maybe younger guys aren't nervous. Just kind of remember that New Zealand, we just need to still be careful and still just remember just how good they can be. Just all of that stuff we're talking about, and because like 20, this kind of feels like any moment, any break between a campaign could be like that England game in 2019. Could just right, we got carried away. Now let's have an ice age for 2 years. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's just the most Irish thing ever for me to think like that.
We only timed that with World Cups, don't worry. We're golden for the next 2 years.
Yeah. So there's a number of reasons, number of times I've maybe anticipated that since, and it hasn't happened. Yeah. So what do we learn there? Farrell always gets this team ready.
Yeah. No World Cup hangover. Go out and beat France away.
Exactly. Hit the ground running. Away. Yeah. So it feels like, and I'm more inclined to, because there's enough. We've seen that enough times. I think I'm more inclined to expect that.
You're giving Andy Farrell credit in the bank.
Yes, not on form and credit.
Yeah. So bookies of Ireland by 6.
There's too much.
Too much. Tighter than that.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm, by the way, just picturing. So you're there for Virgin on tomorrow?
Pitch side, yeah. Colleagues.
So I'm just picturing all the New Zealand of your vintage doing similar pitch side and you going up to Mills and going, hey Mills, and him saying, hey mate. Dear, that's not fair. Andrew Trimble, what a pleasure having you in. Thank you so much.
Thanks, fellas.
Ruaidhri O'Connor of the Irish Independent will be there tomorrow. I presume recording a post-match podcast as well. So On the Whistle podcast coming your way, and Rory's pieces as well across the weekend on the website and in the paper. Thanks again to Energia, who are very much our sponsors for the autumn series, and we will talk to you tomorrow.